Mr. Winter was quite sure that no woman really knew how to drive a car.
Women are very bad drivers,
he said.
They stop suddenly, they go too slowly, they hit things, they leave their cars in the middle of the road. No, you can't trust a woman to drive a car.
He was very surprised when his own wife said to him one day as they were driving home,
"Harry, don't you think I ought to learn to drive?"
Learn to drive? You? What put that idea into your head?
Well, it would be very useful. I could take you to work in the morning, and then I could take Brenda to school. I could do the shopping by car and I could visit my friends sometimes. I could collect Brenda from school in the afternoon. The poor girl has to wait a long time for her bus. Then I could collect you from the office in the evening.
But you would spend all your day driving? And what would you do to the car? This is not a woman's car. No, no, my dear, you could never handle this car.
It was a large, powerful car, and Mr. Winter was very proud of it. He loved to drive it fast along a good wide road, passing all the other cars. He loved to see it standing outside his house, big and bright and powerful looking. He had it for 2 years, but there wasn't a mark on the light blue paint. They were coming now to a crossroad, and the lights were red. Mr. Winter hated having to stop for red lights. The lights changed to green and the cars began to move forward. But the car in front of there didn't move. The driver didn't seem able to start.
"Ha! It's a woman driver,"
said Mr. Winter.
"I thought so. Do you see what I mean, dear?"
But Mrs. Winter did not stop trying. She often mentioned the subject of learning to drive. Their daughter Brenda was on her side too.
"It would be so much easier and quicker for me to come home from school by car,"
she said.
"And in the mornings you wouldn't have to take me to school on your way to the office."
"It would be too much trouble for your mother,"
said Mr. Winter. At last Mrs. Winter said,
"Well, Harry, if you won't teach me to drive, I shall go to a driving school. I believe there is a very good one in the town."
"A driving school? What next? You mustn't pay money to some fellow at a driving school when I can teach you myself."
The following Saturday Mr. Winter drove his wife to a quiet road for her first driving lesson. He showed her how to start the car, how to go forward and backward, and how to stop. Mrs. Winter thought it all seemed quite easy. She drove slowly along, trying to do everything that her husband told her. But Mr. Winter looked most unhappy as he sat beside her, and he cried out,
"Take care! There's a car coming! Mind that corner! Not so fast! Not so fast!"
After 20 minutes he could bear no more.
"I suppose you haven't done too badly,"
he said.
"I'll drive home now."
They got back to the house and he stopped outside the garage.
"Now you can put the car in the garage. You just have to drive straight forward."
Mrs. Winter drove forward, but she didn't drive straight forward. There was a terrible noise as the car struck the side of the garage door.
"What have you done?"
cried Mr. Winter, jumping out.
Look at this! Look at this!
There was a long mark on one side of the car.
This side will all have to be painted again. Oh, why did I ever let a woman get her hands on my car? Well, this is the last time.
After this, Mr. Winter heard no more of his wife's mad idea of learning to drive. The side of the car was painted over, and looked like new again. It cost him £15, but it was worth £15, he thought, to keep Mrs. Winter's hands off the car. For some reason, he no longer felt happy when his wife was sitting beside him in the car. She seemed to be watching him very closely.
Perhaps she thinks she can learn to drive by watching,
he thought. It was worse still when she began to say things about his own driving.
Don't you think, Harry, that you went round that corner a little too fast?
Of course not.
Looking angry, he passed the car in front of them, although they were near the top of a hill.
Oh, Harry,
said his wife. One evening about 3 months after the driving lesson, Mr. Winter was driving home from the office. He had got out of the town and onto a road where he could go quite fast. It wasn't a very straight road, but there weren't usually many cars on it. In front of him, he saw a small black car, which was going very slowly. He looked at the driver. It was a woman, of course. He waited for a chance to pass her, but it was difficult to get a good view of the road in front. He drove along close behind her, getting angrier and angrier.
People like that aren't fit to drive cars,
he thought.
She ought to have a horse.
Now he could pass. He came out from behind the small black car on to the wrong side of the road. When he saw the bus coming round the corner straight towards him, it was too late to stop. The next day Mrs. Winter went to see her husband in hospital. His first question was about the car.
It's in a terrible state,
she said.
But it can be repaired. The man said it would take about a week.
Well, I'm afraid they can't repair me in a week,
said Mr. Winter with a little laugh. He had deep cuts on his face, and his right leg was broken in 2 places. After 5 weeks, the doctor said that Mr. Winter could leave the hospital.
You'll be able to get about all right,
he said.
But you'll have to be careful of that leg. You can't drive yet. Your wife will have to drive you about.
I'm afraid my wife can't drive.
Really? Every woman should be able to drive these days.
The next day Mr. Winter was ready to leave the hospital. His wife was there to meet him, with his daughter Brenda.
It will be wonderful to have you home again,
said his wife.
Come along, I've got a car here to take you home.
A taxi, I suppose.
But here was his own car, standing outside the hospital door.
Who has been driving my car?
said Mr. Winter angrily.
I have, of course,
said his wife, helping him into the back.
I passed my driving test 2 months ago.
She started the car and drove off.
But how did you learn to drive?
I took lessons at the driving school. I only needed 10 lessons. The man said I was a very quick learner.
Mother drives beautiful,
said Brenda.
She has been driving me to school for the last month. I always feel so safe with her.
Well, I don't know what to say. Will you drive me to the office in the mornings?
Of course.
He watched her very closely as she drove back to their house. She didn't make any mistake, though she drove a little too slowly, he thought.
Well, my dear,
he said, as she stopped the car outside their house.
I don't think you drive badly, for a woman, that is.
He got slowly out of the car and turned round to have a good look at it. Yes, it had been very well repaired. The light blue paint was bright once more, and it looked almost like a new car. But what was this? Along the side of the car there were 2 small marks. They seemed to be fresh marks.
Oh yes, dear,
said his wife, not looking at him.
I must tell you about that. I'm afraid I hit the garage door again this morning.